Hey, how are you?
Hey,
Hello.
Hello. Hey,
Hey, how are you?
good, good. How is Soul doing?
He's recovering. And
Good.
he was very much better at the hospital, but here in the house, he's like he's sleeping the whole day.
Yeah,
He's just like not being able to do much.
yeah.
But yeah, that's normal. It was
Uh,
it's a huge surgery,
yeah, yeah.
Got like a big scarf.
Mm,
Yeah.
I'm so glad it was successful. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, yes, we are super happy, but they, like keep going of everything is it has been a challenge this time because
Yeah,
he has a deficiency of antidiuretic hormone. So he has been experiencing the something called diabetes insipidus,
Hmm.
which is like it's a diabetes, but because there is a lot of urination
Hmm.
and thirsty,
Hmm.
but not related with sugar
Yeah,
levels,
yeah.
but just
Wow.
because the hormone that
Yeah,
controls that it's not totally balanced,
yeah.
and that happens in the pituitary and the hypophysis, which it's really close where the tumor was.
Mm, mm.
So going inside, they didn't see the gland or
Mm.
anything, but just being there is kind of
Yeah,
perturbing for the
yeah,
gland, which is it's the center of the brain. Is
yeah. Wow.
nobody needs to go there.
Oh, hey, real quick, I should finish at the hour. I have an important meeting I have to go to at the hour,
Sure.
if that's okay. And then
Hugo as well.
okay, how long can I take? I have just a few slides to share, like 10 minutes or something, or
Yes, 10-15 minutes.
yeah. Okay, perfect. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the invitation to do this.
Yeah, thank you. Two people entered the waiting room. Hugo,
Okay.
are you there?
Maybe you stepped away for a second.
Yes, but I think that I am the host now. Let them people get in. Okay.
hello everyone.
Hello.
Hey, Ben.
Okay. Hi, Ben. How are you?
Sorry, I'm almost there. I'm just finishing the last. Hi, Stuart. Hi, Melina. Sorry.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, Hugo.
Hey, Hugo.
I will be leaving at the hour, but I named host Melina, and she can stay there, but just for you to know.
Okay. Yeah, Stuart
hope
mentioned the
so, right?
same, so we have to start.
Yeah, let's do it for the hour.
Yes.
Cool. Really interesting. Thank you for the reference on the chat, Stuart. They were really amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I might touch on that a bit today too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, looking forward to see or to listen from your perspective. I realized that you hadn't had the chance to explain from complex systems what it's all about. I think it can take many days, right? With you.
Yes, yes.
You are a full mathematical biomimic. So.
Yes, I want to learn so much from you, Stuart.
Likewise. Yeah.
So thank you for making the time. And
yeah.
I think it's just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm gonna grasp another glass of water and then I come back very soon.
Me too. There were like 14 people signed up on the calendar, so, and I just sent a little reminder out.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's wait a couple of minutes and we will start because everyone needs to go. Okay. Edward.
There's only one Zoom line that they've been told to go to this time around.
Oh, good.
Make sure no one's trying to flag me down on Slack.
People is arriving now. Hey, Edward, how are you?
Edward, hey.
Back from the jungle.
Oh,
Oh.
wonderful.
So good. Hi, Harry. Hello.
Hi.
Hello again, Harry. Edward, good to see you.
Yeah, Ben.
Okay, just more minute to start so people can join from the beginning. Hi, Dita.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Okay.
Busy days. Right after this, we're launching the Masters in Regenerative Action, the open house.
Yes.
Is it right after this, Edward?
Yeah. Tail to tail.
Yeah, but I have the time for 8 and something. Can you just share with me an invite or something?
11:30 my time, and it's 10 a.m. my time now.
Okay, so in 1 hour and a half. Okay,
Okay, good.
perfect. I have a half an hour meeting in between, so it fits perfect.
Yeah, we want to finish at the top of the hour.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I'm gonna start sharing. I'm admitting all people, and I will start sharing my screen. So okay. I'm not sure that I will be able to admit everyone while sharing, Hugo. I will just put you, if you are a co-host, you will be
Put me as a
able to
co-host, I
admit.
think. Yeah, I'm not sure that I have the co-host, so.
I am
yeah.
doing it now.
Okay, now I'm co-host.
Just because my screen is not very good when I am full screen sharing.
Totally, I can do the welcome. Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Okay,
You
good.
can turn off the waiting room too, you know, on security.
Okay, but then it asks for a code. But yeah, well, right now I think it's okay. I can manage.
Okay, good.
Go, Melina. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone to this experiment we are doing from the biomimicry perspectives for regeneration of finances. And this is the second session, and we are a couple of biomimics today hosting this, which is Hugo Araujo, who already you know, and he has been working in digital biomimicry. Myself, who's biologist and biomimicry professional as Hugo as well. And we have been hosting today, we are hosting today Stuart Cowan, who is a mathematician and very expert in complex systems. And he has been involved in an amazing development of economy and finances. And he will have the opportunity to present himself better, but also to share with us a perspective on how introduce living systems thinking into economy and finances. So this experiment is the combination of the financial dojo and RCN, who is the Regenerative Communities Network, which is linking the local with the global. And we are all bioregions working in local contexts to link between ourselves and creating flows of information, and now upgrading that to flow of resources to be able to fund projects of regeneration in many bioregions around the globe. So the idea is to start to look into nature and go from the idea to the reality of how really nature works and how we can get inspired by nature into our thinking about finances specifically. So today is the second session. We will be talking about ecosystems and the basis for balance. And the way we are going to do this session is that I will be presenting some biology about ecosystems. And the idea is during this presentation, with your mind of economy and mindsets of finances, you will try to be inspired in how we can be or emulate this genius, this information, this knowledge from nature to be and to understand how to move money in our world. And there will be a mapping in cyber vortex about our ideas when we will be sharing that. And we will be listening after that, Stuart, who has been already applying living systems thinking into economy and finances. And then we will have the final reflections. And today we will be finishing at the top of the hour. So I hope that that we will be sharing more for the third session as we did the first. So let's start with the ecosystems, and the idea is to pass from ideology on what should be to biology on how actually ecosystems do in order to create value and adding value to their environment. So we have this idea of economic cycles, and we have these like no cycling, no unpredictable systems. And what actual nature does is something that is much more cyclic, and when there are some perturbations, nature is prepared to absorb those perturbances. So the thing that we have been trying to do is to hold very still. If you see the image at the right, we want to hold the bow. We want to control everything, and that's like the mindset that we have been thinking, and we build something square inside a ball. And actually nature functions more like a far from equilibrium dynamics, no linear dynamics, which is like a ball that it is moving and something round is inside, so everything can adapt and move with the big movement of the eras. And that movement and that adaptation bring us to specific ecosystemic relationships between species. And what we have in this type of relationships is that it's a 3 bits, let's say, relationship. One is positive. It can be positive for one species, it can be negative for one species, or it can be neutral. And this is the distribution of those relationships in an ecosystem. And the thing is that actually, when competition, that it is so anchored in our economic thinking, it presents itself in nature. It's a trigger for evolution because nature wants to avoid it, actually. So what happens with that is that both species are losing energy. It's a negative relationship, and they want to get out of that. So it triggers evolution, it triggers changes because it's negative. It's taking a lot of energy from it. I just realized that I have to admit something and it is not appearing in August's screen. So I stopped it there, but I'm coming back. So this is something that we really need to change in our perspective of how nature functions. And because this is the way of nature prefers to work is actually by mutualism, symbiosis. They want to mature relationships with relationships in which both species are winning, win-win relationships or win-win-win relationships. So they can really expand their things. And what we are discovering is that there is this breathing in nature, is in taking but letting go as well. This is something that happens. It's like a life and death. And life and death are very, very important in nature, and it is part of how we can understand our economic systems as well. And like the metamorphosis, for example, we have from egg to be caterpillar, and the caterpillar will transform itself, liquidifying their body into a cocoon, and completely change the organization of their cells, of the cells, alive cells, to create a butterfly. And there is like a guide for this pattern to emerge, but at the same time is being able to experience the death of a caterpillar. So it's super important for life, this transformation, acceptance of death. And this is something that happens in ecosystems very, very commonly. This is the transition of what we call in ecology R strategy to K strategy. And this is kind of, if we see the forest when a tree dies in the omega side, and it has this gap into the dorsal of the canopy of the forest. So differences in light will bring, let's say, kind of plants and seeds to grow, to sprout. The sprout that grow very fast in the R square, and they will grow and they will cover the first, but they don't last very long. Just several of all those seeds that sprout and then grow at that point will arrive to the mature forest. And because the mature forest is much more complex, it has much more relationships and symbiotic and mutualist relationships, and will stabilize and be more resilient and will integrate much more diversity. So, and then one tree will die again, and we have this cycle of regeneration. So, for example, in a company that we have something that it is dying, and we don't need anymore a product or a way of functioning, we can start to seed, to make these seedlings of new ideas, and maybe some of them will grow faster than other ones, but we need to understand how to invest in these growing, fast growing ideas and projects in order to to understand this first stage. But we are going to a maturity, also nourishing ideas that they're slow growth. So when we see what our strategy has, low diversity, resource linear change, short life cycles, fast growth, quantity of production, low cooperation, and high need of healing. Especially, there are many plants that grow in erosion grounds when they need to be healed. So as dandelions, for example, and many others. So it's like a healing part of the ecosystem. Huge input, fast exchange. First step, you can have a screenshot of this. First step of regeneration. So cover the empty soil, you know, like it's really like okay, let's regenerate fast and action. Act fast is like one of this point of regeneration. It has a low stability, but it grows towards a higher stability. It has a high entropy and so on. While the key strategy is a little bit more like integrating high diversity, it's more a network of resources, the flows are more stable, long and complex life cycles, network of reciprocity, quality of production, developed cooperation, almost closed resource cycles. They're not closed. We are not a closed planet. Slow exchange, regeneration to thrive, high stability, low entropy, high complexity, and big flows of information and resources. So, sorry. So one big lesson about this is that we need to integrate diversity in order to mature our finance system. The way we think about investments and having impact and how to move those resources and seeing the regeneration as this mature process that nature has is very important for understanding also how to finance and where to finance those processes. And because we are facing the death of a tree that has been functioning for 200 years now, I think that it is very, very important to understand that these resources need to be reintegrated into the new forest. And this distribution, and I want to come back to our first session for people who was here. We talk about how cells are connecting and transferring resources one to each other, and this is a resume of that. But what I want to bring to that is like to bring this distribution of resources of a dying system, financial system. We really need to go to another scale, which is a cellular scale. It's just the scale of the mycelium, of the transfer in the ground from big concentrations of resources into the whole space where resources are needed for regeneration. So we want to reestablish this equilibrium, which brings us to, is like there is an accumulation, and there will be accumulation of some structures and maturation of some structures, but there is also this flow of free flow of resources, and it is like we maybe can see it as a contradiction, accumulation versus distribution, but actually both needs to be and actually coexist in nature. So a tree is an accumulation of resources, but at the same time, the free flow that happens underground and overground is the flow that it needs to be in order to create a whole ecosystems. So this is like the breathing that I was talking about, the breathing and in connection to create life. So how to create ecosystems is through these little differences and understanding that integrating biodiversity will bring us into the connection of of how to flow those resources within a new perspective for finances. And this is what these organisms do. These are corals, polyps, and they are just really close by. There are no cells, there are organisms, kind of anemones, little tiny anemones, just like closer, really, really tight. And they will be creating such an amazing transfer and distribution of resources that they will be creating bigger organisms that will be creating more niches to integrate more diversity. So we will have sponges there, we will have fishes, and we will have much more diversity of even corals and animals, and they will be creating and accumulating some kind of resources, but letting it flow and emerge so much diversity that they will be creating in a big scale, huge amount of like flows and information and life. So this scale cross, let's say, is very, very important, but it goes through the distribution of resources at a very, very, very small scale for what we really need to understand. So the question on creating these ecosystems is how we can add value to that ecosystem, to where we are connecting, to our neighbors, let's say, to our really like being in this breaching wall that we need together, how we breach our connections in order to transfer those resources from a big huge tree that it is dying now, which is our let's say past finance system, to the emergence of another one. So we are actually this bridge, and we want to be able to offer our knowledge and our senses and our connections before asking for whatever. So it's kind of, if we can really build and weave this tissue, flows of resources have to pass through that, through those bridges in order to regenerate the planet. So that's the biology for today. And the next step is a little bit more on how what emerges very shortly. So one or two people, if you want to share a little bit of what this biology is inspiring on you, and then we can listen to Stuart. So if somebody wants to comment something, you are very, very welcome to do it. I know this is a lot. Oh, John, hi. I see you.
Hi, Melina. Thanks for that. It was wonderful. I was particularly intrigued with this idea that I forget the words you used, but how to get capital to flow to the very micro, bottoms up, cellular level rebuilding. I think challenges we have because the capital is all accumulated, and those who are shepherding that capital use as an excuse that small projects are not, they don't move the needle and they don't scale, and how we educate, in a sense, Warren Buffett should spray his money across 100,000 small foundations rather than exactly what he did, which is exactly the opposite. And how we even talk about that in conventional finance language is a mystery to me, but getting clear on the biology would be a valuable first step.
Yeah, thank you, John. Absolutely, that's one of the gaps that we need to bridge. And I think that for RCN is one of these tools that we have now, as we are locally connecting really local projects and really, communities, very specific communities, but, like kind of a routine or the ramifications of roots that connect with a big trunk that connects with, like a funnel of resources. So I see RCN like this funnel that really will be able to distribute at that specific, level of cellular, let's say, action point. So that's definitely one of our challenges. Yeah, totally. Somebody has another comment or another thing to say about what John also shared?
When you were sharing, the way a forest regenerates after a tree falls, the phase where you have lots and lots of fast-growing small plants that come in, most of which don't live in, aren't part of the mature forest, are going to disappear, but they're holding the soil together. They're doing other things. They get composted. That was interesting to me in terms of the story, again, similar to the way you're saying, John, that funders don't want to support lots of small projects. Because they don't move the needle, the small projects are also criticized for being in competition with each other and duplicative. And there's all of this stuff we hear about why the work that's going on is not going to do it. But I think that the story you're telling, the example, shows how, no, that's a natural phase when you have when you have new growth, when you're moving from something that's decayed, that's fallen, that's collapsed into a new mature system, that you do start out with this very sort of fast, competitive, messy thing where you don't expect most of that to stick around, but it's still performing a function in terms of, getting to the mature system, the new mature system.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Stuart, do you like to link this also from your perspective? We would like to listen to you.
Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Hugo. Thanks for the invitation to join you. So if we go back to the origin of the universe, 14 billion years ago or so, we're part of one story, one narrative, one history that links all of the vast diversity of life together. All organisms are related. They share this evolutionary history pathway. They've been co-creating the diversity. They've been filling every imaginable niche on this beautiful planet, from several miles beneath the ocean surface to the interstitial pores of deep, deep rocks 5 miles down, out into the lower atmosphere, bacteria floating up there too. Cranes have been spotted flying above Mount Everest at 30,000 feet. But this whole biosphere, it's the only known place of life in the universe. It's this thin shell. And if you imagined the entire biosphere, the living fabric of life from about 5 miles below to 5 miles above the Earth's surface, it would be as if you blew a breath on a tennis ball, and it would be a layer that thin compared to the size of this planet. This is the fragile, only known living entity in the universe. And we call it Gaia. And Gaia refers to the self-organizing, coherence of life, that it's connected, that it's working together, that there are these linkages from the tiniest scales, from that tree decomposing in the forest, giving its nutrients back in this efflorescence of life, all the way to vast biogeochemical cycles. So the huge flows of carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus replenishing, moving throughout the oceans and the estuaries, the soils, into the next generation of life. That's life. That's a living process, that connectivity, the ecosystem quality of life, all the way out to that coherent Gaia level. And we know that even at the scale of the entire biosphere of Gaia itself, there are these huge feedbacks that enable life to connect with itself, that enable the nutrients, the water to keep feeding all of life. And that provides this living framework, armature for all of life to flourish all the way down to the tiniest habitats. And even a single tide pool is like a miniature ecosystem in its own right. So from the perspective of life, of living systems, there's no separation, there's no division. The important thing is the relationships, the connectivity, all life co-creating. So if we draw an arbitrary line around a living system, we can destroy its integrity and coherence if we're not careful. So if we think about economics, it wasn't crafted, it wasn't built with the flourishing of all life in mind. I trace modern economics to John Locke's work. He was a British philosopher, famous philosopher who really focused on property rights and really established in the modern world the sense that until you kind of chop off, create a boundary around something and claim it and give it human ownership, that it's not creating any value, it's ill-defined, it's literally worthless from a human perspective. And that became the foundation for economics. You parcel off these different things and you buy and sell them, whether it's property or intellectual property, a piece of wood, anything that you can sort of extract from life. So that wasn't a really good foundation for economics, to start without any sense that to even begin to create a boundary and a set of walls that you need to work with life, to work with its flows and processes and its flourishing. So from John Locke, there was a mathematical formalism built up in the 1850s that tried to say, let's create the mathematics of economics based on thermodynamics. That was kind of the exciting hot science of the day. It was what let us design steam engines and factories and produce a lot of stuff, with newly minted coal and soon after the first oil wells. So thermodynamics, again, is not a very good foundation for life. It's a good foundation to understand things that are entropic and running down and mechanical and not filled with life. So the economics of the day began to have this mathematics that really was just a very, kind of silly attempt to mimic some of the equations emerging in thermodynamics. And they evolved and got very fancy into the 20th century. And as a mathematician, I can tell you the mathematics in economics is absurd. It took this wrong turn so early. The conceptual foundations are so wrong. It just got more and more arcane and kind of like, the old model of planets orbiting other planets so that the Earth could stay at the center of the solar system. It got so complicated to try to explain that the Earth was the center of the world. That's what economics is. It's gotten so complicated trying to explain that humans are at the center of the world. And the reason why that can't be done is that we're not. We're one species among 10, 20, 30 million. We don't know. We're still finding new species everywhere. So what would it look like if we were participating in the web of life as one species among this incredible diversity in the fungal kingdom? And Melina showed images, the hyphae, the roots of the fungi, and their incredible richness in the way they interact and feed different tree species and link the forest together. They call it the wood wide web. It's like the forest's inherent intelligent network. So what would it mean to decenter economics so that humans aren't at the center of it at all, that it's this mix of all other species. Well, that would probably mean that we put commons at the heart of economics, so that we put coherent parts of the world that function well integrally together and support their health and flourishing. So that might mean a lake as a commons, or a vast grassland, or a coast, and all of its interactions, and to begin to attune the economics to the actual contours of the land, of the waters, and of human cultures, because it's really this nexus of human cultural diversity and biological diversity that's the true wealth of the planet. So if we built an economics focused on commons, focused on layer after layer of integral functioning systems nested within each other, paying attention to the connections, the weaving, we'd have an economics that could jump up and down scales between the tiniest little tide pool ecosystem all the way out to Gaia, up and down and across, and with reciprocity, with intention, with care, with cultural reciprocity, with an understanding that different cultures may have incommensurable ways of understanding and valuing the world, and that a single economics couldn't possibly force those boundaries to be crossed. So how do we create an economics based on regeneration and on the commons? And it's really as simple as shifting from whatever you can extract, whatever line you can draw, whatever property boundaries you can draw, and then whatever piece of wood, right, whatever fish, whatever kilogram of gravel you can extract from that square of land, shifting that, so that that's been what we valued most fundamentally, shifting to what if the integrity and the functioning of each ecosystem, each commons, up to the Gaian scale, what if that was the measure of value? We're between stories. In the old story, we had these squares of property, we had extraction as the simplest thing to measure, and economics that used the dead mechanical thermodynamic equations to model taking things from living systems, paying no attention to the consequences of sending carbon into the atmosphere, the consequences of overfishing. I grew up in one of the most extraordinary ecosystems in the world, the coastal temperate rainforest on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, with 2,000-year-old Western red cedar trees, orcas, fjords. And in my short time growing up, in a 15-year span, I saw the fish over-harvested. I saw, incredible ancient forests reduced to lunar scale clear cuts. I saw the mines completely tapped out. And that's why I started on a regenerative path. Why I wanted to understand the patterns, the dynamics, the beauty, the complexity, the interconnection of the living world, to try to create an economic pathway that would support that would enable that, rather than the business as usual that I saw in the kind of frontier in British Columbia in the 1970s and 1980s. It was one of the last frontiers of extraction in North America at that time, where anything goes. You just cut down every tree, take out every fish. And it was heartbreaking. And that set me on my path. So to go from an extractive economics to a regenerative economics, it's as simple as saying, we don't value the extractive process itself, arbitrary boundaries, arbitrary equations that pretend that they can somehow model the best way to take things from arbitrary boundaries that end up destroying systems. Starting with that foundation, we can never get to a regenerative economics. So we start with the integrity, we start with the whole systems, with life, with regeneration of real places, real ecosystems, real meeting places of biocultural diversity. We start with that. That's the new story. The old story is one of extraction, degradation, systems imbalance that was actually, has colonial roots. It was consciously created by John Locke during the heart of the colonial process to justify colonization, to justify taking land from indigenous people. Those are the roots of economics. And we have to face that. Decolonizing includes decolonizing economics. So an economics that started with biocultural diversity would not have been used to justify conquest. It would have been used to say conquest is immoral, unethical, can never be justified. And there would have been a somewhat different pathway over the last few hundred years if we started with the economics of the commons, of life, of regeneration, Elinor Ostrom's vision of the commons. So we're seeing this gradual evolution where back in the 1990s, the field of ecological economics was developed. Very important step. I was studying at Berkeley at the time when people like Richard Norgaard were developing the field. And it was a huge breakthrough because it did try to say ecosystems have inherent value. They generate what are called ecosystem services, pollination, soil diversity, climate stability, and that these services have real measurable value. They feed the human economy. And it was a half step, really important half step. The unfortunate news is even ecological economics hasn't pervaded the field. It's still considered a marginal academic discipline. And it was only a half step because it's still centered humans. It's centered what we could take from ecosystems, and in this case, more in the form of these soft ecosystem services rather than extracting lumber or minerals or something. So it was a great advance, but halfway there. So now we're confronted with a planet in crisis, 2021. I spent 20 years in Portland, Oregon. I love the area. I spent most of my life in the Pacific Northwest. To see this place that I know so well hit 115 degrees about 10 days ago was absolutely heartbreaking. It was shattering. It was almost 10 degrees higher than any other day in history, recorded history in Portland. Same thing in Seattle. Unbelievable, absurdly high temperature. A remote part of British Columbia interior was the hottest place in the world, hotter than any desert, and burned up the next day. The town of Lytton in British Columbia. It hit 121 degrees and it burned up the next day. We all have to make a personal commitment. The planet is melting. We can reweave ourselves. We can do this work. It has to be so deep and transformative. And we have to build these bridges between a new story that I think many of us here understand. We're feeling towards it. We're sensing it. We want to be there, a story of regeneration, of restoration, of possibility for human communities and the living world. And how do we value things in the new story? That is a really interesting question. And as a mathematician, I've wrestled with it for about 30 years. And I'm still, every day, I'm always overjoyed with the connections, the beauty in nature, the surprise. We discover this whole new organism, whole new relationship. It's so much more complex than we ever could have imagined or modeled. So we just have to try. We just have to find a way to value whole systems, ecosystems, commons. And we'll try different ways, and different cultures already do this in different ways. There's an Aboriginal wisdom around this of songlines that gives very precise knowledge for how to treat the land. And there is this indigenous wisdom in much of the world. There's traditional knowledge in much of the world. There's a lot to build on. Different cultures, different geographies can solve this differently. But it comes down to valuing the whole, valuing life, coherence, connection. And in the old story, we valued extraction. We drew lines. It was colonial in its essence by design. It was designed by an emerging empire to take more from those who had held the land with love and regard for thousands of years. So let's do this. Let's acknowledge the difficult history of an extractive economics. Let's build the new history, and let's find the bridges between the old extractive ways of holding power, ownership, economic wealth, and a new way of valuing. We have to build these bridges. We have to build narratives and stories to help us all cross the chasm. I don't have any judgment or blame for those in the multiple systems that we're living in. We all just need to learn together and find this bridge together so that all of us can value the most important thing in the world, which right now, in 2021, the most valuable thing in the world to do is to restore land ecological functionality, acre by acre, and do that in a way that honors human dignity and cultural pathways and local autonomy. So I'm getting the time signal. That's just scratching the surface.
Yeah, totally, Stuart. Thank you very much, and it was very touching what you share, and also, you know, like a pointing into something that we really need to pass through as humanity is the dual of what we have done, like acknowledging. We have this philosopher, South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han, who has been talking about, you know, like the palliative society and how we are just, you know, like a dying, and based on no recognition of the pain and the, you know, trying to put some much stuff on how to deal with that pain. And actually part of this regeneration is to acknowledge it, is to feel that pain that we have been doing very wrong, and to acknowledge that pain is already half of the healing, and that's what the planet is asking us right now. You know, like we have been having this kind of waves passing through our lives, personal lives, everyone, how many people have been dying and how many connections have been reorganizing lately for everyone in the planet, just to be able to, you know, to face that pain, to understand that we really need to do differently. And so thank you for reminding that part of the process. This is super, super important, and I am seeing it much more and more. And yeah, there was this comment of David also in the chat talking about the scales and how we can you know, connect and with what John and Ben were saying before about, you know, like how we can change this mindset of scaling of or big impact, or how to present or making this new narrative about the impact for regeneration of the planet, that actually is kind of a belief. Like we are, you know, starting from the belief that how is this scaling? How is this big impact we need to do in the world? But actually, it's like this image or this belief that we have on how to do that impact is misunderstood. Is not exactly the way that we should do it, and as Stuart was telling us, and I think that it is very a good point to tap into right now, because it's actually to let die this belief. Like we really need to grieve it, to understand that this is not how impact and how really actions have to be done, and we have nature to inspire us in how to do it. So I think that this is a great conversation, and yeah, how to change that narrative. I think that we really need to pass through that pain and name it collectively, doing that process that actually has been doing it in very, there are many people talking about just this collective grieving of the dying society, in order to, you know, like let emerge what it is, what needs to rise, what needs to be born. So yeah, thank you very much for connecting all those dots and pointing out this big gap that we really need to address. Anyone else? We have 9 minutes left, and I would like to hear everyone. Hugo, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to add something because it seems to me super relevant. The fact that we need to change narratives and also to understand two different things. One is the transition from the R to K. So biologically, how do you recognize or how can you trigger this transition in between one behavior to the other one? And then going back into what John is asking on how is the energy flow or the distribution into the cellular level from a macroscope, and adding to this that the line of time that we are analyzing, we feel that is mature. But if we think about the 14 billion years, the 4 billion years, the 3.8 billion years of life, as we know it, then the 500 years are really, really nothing. So maybe getting this scope over time will give us more possibilities of changing something that has lasted just for a little few times. So maybe we can, it's easier to change than we think, and we're just part of a bigger process. And it might take many generations, who knows, because our opportunity there is also very minimal. So when for me was this opportunity to understand the forest, I wanted to how everything is connected. And I think, just to keep it very, very short, I found this possibility, John, of understanding as energy. So it is, you can go in a cellular level is a specific way, in an ecological level is through the food web. But when you go into neural networks, mycelium, ecosystems, they are all just exchanging energies with different values inside. But this to me should be the conversation that we need to have in finance. It is not about money. It is really about what kind of energy you are taking, whether in the shape of a tree, from one place to another. And therefore, you are affecting the metabolism of that place in one way or another. If you take one mother tree from Panama and put it in US, it affects both sides because you are transporting energy. So for metabolism, I think we will touch a little bit more tomorrow. But this idea on biology, bridging science with traditional perspective of reciprocity, I think it's very simple, but it's also very powerful. So just to put it in a different way, these energy exchanges or ecological interactions or specific interactions, as well as Melina was saying, they are super important. And I think if we can understand that our relationship is predatory, then therefore we can think about how to change it. And this opportunity between the harm that we've been doing and the possibility of regenerating, you show me somehow that, John, with the fire in the forest, it is a regenerative gap. So we really need to stop harming to get sustainable and then to move into the next stage. And if we can have this common narrative, simple common narrative of energy exchanges, just three things happening there, both ways, not just one way, because as you were saying in thermodynamics, Stuart, in system thinking, it's always linear. Like I cause something, but it's never both at the same time all the time. So this is what we have right now somehow. Like we are getting connected, but what if we can get understood ourselves as a part of a living system? And I think this kind of narrative gives us the possibility. It's just one of the many options that will come, for sure. I'm not saying that it has to be absolute, but if we put some numbers there, it is not just about the time spent of the guy cutting the tree, but it's also about the value that the tree offers to the ecosystem and how this energy is evaluated. So we get into, I think, in a better discussion. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Hugo. Somebody else wants to jump? We have 5 minutes left, so go ahead.
I'd like to say something. The effort today points to the point of we did very well in creating an extinction. How do we step back from it? If we can do that in one direction, we have the creative capacity to pull ourselves back from it. And Melina mentioned the dandelion very briefly, but the dandelion is a first responder. And in Greek, it's called taraxacum officinal, which is a remedy for the destruction. And the remedy, the plant itself actually drills down into the earth to bring the nutrients back to restore the soil. And when you magnify that across a field, nature does it by itself. So basically, all of us are first responders. And we need to expand that thought about being first responders, because every time we hear of a disaster, we're always honoring the first responders. And we have the possibility to do that now, economically, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And given what I've been experiencing over all these Zoom calls, there is so much of it in everybody's thought and in everybody's feeling that aggregating all of this energy flow has already created the blueprint for our success. And I think we just have to magnify that in a new brand story. And I've been working with Hugo on this and Colin on the idea of a group that I founded called Brand.Earth, where we focus on brand and what the meaning of brand is. And typically it started out from the beginning of when a human decided to create ownership of an animal. They took a branding iron and just branded the animal, and now it's mine. I took another view of brand, given where we are, and took the perspective of creating an acronym for it. Be responsible, accessing nature's diversity. And once we take that perspective and expand that, we create brand new stories of new brands that are coming out based on our regenerative perspectives. And that's the economical relationship that we can now have in our ecological responsibility. And I think that's a path that we could all endeavor to be on, and how to make that a story worth telling. So my second day of meeting you all, I'm still resonating from Monday's experience, and really thank you for being here and participating and moving the needle in so many directions.
Thank you, Harry. I have to say, the first responders is such a powerful way to think about the work we need to do. And Edward Muller is on the call today. Edward's spearheading a global effort to create a network of regenerative first responders, and they'll have a kickoff meeting shortly on that. And it's a new Masters in Regenerative Action that will mobilize first responders in bioregions all over the world. So hosted by Edwards University, University for National Cooperation, and Ubiquity University. So connect to that. And I actually usually intersperse lots of powerful, positive movements. And today I just wanted to do some difficult truth telling, but I'll close with something quite extraordinary, which is, as part of our imagination, we might include the digital beings. And we're seeing something very interesting happen with some of the leading artificial intelligence scientists in the world starting to think very seriously about Gaia. James Lovelock, who developed the term, actually wrote an entire book about applying AI to the thriving of Gaia. And there's an extraordinary neurophysiologist, Carl Friston, who's developing a theory of how to determine the most powerful actions that we can take to restore Gaia at different levels of scale. And believe it or not, there's some very interesting mathematics and very interesting software, and vast webs are being organized around this, including something called the Open Earth Foundation. So as much as there's a shadow side of the digital technologies, which is a deep shadow indeed, there are emerging digital beings, allies, software that we also need to enroll along with all of the other species. So I need to jump, but thank you so much, and look forward to staying connected with everyone.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and everyone. We will see each other again next Monday at same time with John Fullerton will be our guest at that moment. So we are hoping you will join us again and invite everyone you think that will be interested. Thank you. Have a good day.
Joe and Stuart.
Thank you.